Welcome back, everyday Americans. You've rejoined the Constitution study. And as promised, I have with me Dennis Brennan. He is the author of a book that I think will fit very well into our conversation today. Dennis, welcome to the Constitution study.
Well, thanks for having me.
So you reached out because of this book, but tell me a little bit, tell my audience a little bit about you and your background and maybe what led you to write this particular book.
Sure. Well, I'm an attorney. Been an attorney for about 35 years. I've also been involved in political campaigns, mostly local municipal races, but some county races, statewide races. Um, I'm a former journalist. I hope no one holds that against me. I've actually been a reporter, editor, and published my own newspapers for a while. So it's kind of a diverse background. And a friend of mine wrote a book. He's actually a Democrat political consultant. He wrote a book about Aaron Burr, and he asked me to read it. I read it, and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, excellent writing, great job, but I think you missed the story. I think the story really is how Donald Trump's been treated compared to Burr, and there's a lot of similarities." And he looked at me like I had, two heads, or how most Democrat consultants look at Republicans, I suppose. And I said, well, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to write something like that. And that's how I started writing the book.
So before we get to the book, since you're an attorney, every attorney I meet, I ask a question. When you were in law school, did you study the language of the Constitution or constitutional law?
We studied constitutional law, is what it came down to.
Yeah, don't feel bad. In the 10 plus years I've been doing this, I've had one person say they studied the Constitution in law school, which is really kind of concerning for other reasons. But you mentioned the book. It's called DC Swamp Strikes Back, Aaron Burr, Donald Trump, and their similar battles. And by the way, thank you for a copy. And it really gets to this idea that history doesn't necessarily repeat, but it certainly does rhyme.
Exactly.
So in looking at this, what we're seeing is the similar legal battles, the the use of the quote unquote justice system as a political tool, as a political weapon, the collaboration with the media. Again, nothing new. This started way back at the beginning of the Republic.
Yes. And I think most people are surprised by that. Um, reading that first book about Aaron Burr got me to read a lot of books about Aaron Burr all of a sudden because, what you remember about Aaron Burr is the duel with Hamilton.
Right.
Most people don't remember anything else. They may not even remember he was vice president. Uh, and a big political force for to get Jefferson elected. So yes, you see some of the same tactics used then by Jefferson and his crew, basically Alexander Hamilton, um, and their friends scattered throughout the country, using the legal system, lawfare as it's been called now, to go after Aaron Burr and basically ruin the guy.
Now, I have to admit, pretty much all I learned about Aaron Burr in high school was, yeah, he shot Alexander Hamilton in this famous duel just across the Potomac River from DC, if memory serves. And that was pretty much it. But like, was it Parl Harvey used to say, the rest of the story was really quite interesting. As I said, I looked through, I didn't finish your book, but I found it interesting to see the parallels of a person in power versus a person in power, the political basis for the attacks, and again, using the legal system and in many cases the media system. I like the idea that you said you read your friend's book and you said there's more to this story, and let's talk about it. Let's read it. Like I said, other than learning a little more history than Mr. Burr, what are the types of things? Like you said, he was vice president, and he was a political influence during this time. Now, if memory, Jefferson was an anti-federalist. Was Burr a federalist?
He wasn't really either when they reached out to him. And he's credited with actually turning New York around to get the electoral votes. And back then, that made a big difference, as it does now. And when he did that, um, he allowed Jefferson. He got enough votes for Jefferson basically to win, and he was the vice president. So he was kind of a good political strategist in his own right, and a power within New York. But he had a lot of enemies there too. So those enemies would come back to haunt him.
Now, whose vice president was he? I'm trying to remember. Was he Jefferson's vice
He
president?
was Jefferson's vice president for the first term.
Got
And
you.
then second term, Jefferson dropped him, which is
So what
strange.
happened? What happened there?
I think from what I researched, a lot of Jefferson's people were constantly in his ear, telling him that Burr is undermining him. Burr wants to be president. Burr is going to fight you, for the nomination. So Jefferson left it open, and people like Alexander Hamilton made sure that Burr didn't have the votes to become vice president.
Now, let's see. This would have been Jefferson was first elected in 1800, so this has been 1804. So the I don't think the 12th Amendment has come into place yet. I'm
Right,
trying to remember when the 12th Amendment was, because that's when there were separate elections for president and vice president versus the vice president being the first loser, the first runner up.
right, right. And this whole thing goes back to, Jefferson's the first election, um, because Adams and Jefferson ran, and
Yeah.
Adams won, but it was a tie. And in that instance, Burr was accused by some of Jefferson's people of holding out votes, that he could have given all his votes over to Jefferson because all four were um, were basically elected. So, you know, a strange way of doing it. They changed all that. Thank God.
Well, yeah, that's always because that part has always interested me. The idea that the vice president would be the first loser, which again, Adams, Jefferson, you had Federalist, anti-Federalist, you had completely different ideas. But again, we were also dealing with a time when the president wasn't a demi-king like he is today. There's but a lot has changed, and I've always I would say the idea of a separate president and vice president. Of course, we don't do that nowadays. We have the ticket, so that the
Yeah.
people don't choose who they want voted for vice president. Um, it's the political party which a pox on both their houses and all that fun stuff. But again, it goes to show, even to the beginning of the republic, these partisan intrigue has had a tremendous impact on the nation and how we live our lives. What other things did you learn as you were researching this book?
Well, one of the things, at one point, Burr was accused of treason. We have treason thrown around a lot now. A lot of the Democrats have accused Donald Trump of treason for, meeting with Putin, for instance. Um, in that case, it was known as the Burr conspiracy, and they claimed that he was trying to form his own country. At that time, we didn't have all the land of the country, so he's basically going to go to war with Spain. He was actually charged with treason, and what I found when you talk about the rhyme of history, you had it's Justice Marshall, who was Supreme Court Justice. He actually oversaw the trial for treason and ruled that it didn't actually meet the requirements of treason. And because they couldn't show that Burr took a step to actually put any plan into place, they just had a few witnesses saying this is what he wanted to do, which he denied. It's interesting, I think, that Burr was the benefactor of, or he actually received the benefit from Justice Marshall. And Marshall, much like in Trump's trials where he had those four ongoing cases, Elaine Cannon from Florida, the district judge, had made some rulings that helped Trump, delayed the case, allowed him to move forward in the election. And I think the fact the judiciary actually stood up, they were really the only thing in between either of these guys having criminal convictions at the federal level.
Yeah, because under the Constitution, treason has a very specific definition, which you're right, they throw the word around all over the place. And I frequently am correcting people just because you don't like what he does, or just because he's working with somebody you think he shouldn't be, it's not treason. It can be a lot of things, but in the United States, treason means you are either making war against the states or aiding or giving aid and comfort to an enemy of the United States, because you're talking a public enemy, a nation at war with us, not the drug cartels or
Yeah,
it. But
exactly.
again, it's a perfect example of, well, you had a bunch of hearsay, but there was no evidence to support it. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Justice Marshall in a lot of his decisions, but again, to say, well, wait a second, that's hearsay. Where's the evidence to prove it? We keep here at the Constitution Study, we're always asking, you can have any opinion you want. That doesn't make it true unless you have some evidence to prove it. And like I said, thankfully, the judiciary saved us. Many ways you may say the judiciary saved us in the Trump trials by hopefully applying the law rather than manipulating it by politics. But there was a lot. What other things do you think? I mean, I'm guessing my audience would be interested in this. When I'll read this book, what other little appetizers can you give them to encourage them to come read the book?
Well, you touched on one thing about the media. I call in the book our current media the Dem media because of all the links between the Democratic Party and the, you know, not only on air people, but the people running the networks now. And those connections, along with the way they report, it's now, as of 2022, 3% of journalists identified themselves as Republicans. That
That
was down,
much.
yeah, 3%. I don't know who they are. They're all on Fox probably. But the
Or
other,
hiding in the basement.
but then you go, just in 2013, it was only 7%. The funny thing about this historically is, like, everybody back in the party press era had their own newspaper. So the Federalists had their paper. Everybody was out there advocating. So this advocacy journalism that we have now, we link it and show how it's the same as it was. I mean, it is history, but at the same time, we're seeing it again. I think it's a part that anybody that watches the news or even reads the newspaper, you can read Chicago Tribune where I'm at. It's hard for me to get through the paper because in the first paragraph, they'll start with opinions and it's a news story. And that's constant, whether it's Associated Press, Washington Post. It seems as if opinion is now considered journalism.
Yeah, it's amazing because we live in the information age, which means we have access to all sorts of information, including different points of view. The one thing I think as a people we haven't learned to exercise is our the critical thinking of, okay, so and so said this, where's the proof to make it true? And we read the headlines. I I cover it all the time here. The headline says this, then you read the story and it finds out it's something completely different. And the beauty is having access to all this information. The cost is we need to trust but verify, as Reagan used to say.
Yes.
And if we don't verify, we end up in a lot of trouble. But so like I said, I didn't get through the book. I didn't have a chance, but it was very interesting to see the parallels. There's nothing new under the sun. And this is all happening again, which I think is something we should learn from, that maybe what we're experiencing isn't as new and unique as we think it is. And maybe we should learn from history because of that rhyme. Before we run out of time, though, I want to give you a chance. Where can people find the book? How can they get in touch with you? And what other things you'd like to tell us before we call this interview done and done?
Yeah. Well, the important thing is, the book. This is the book. um, it's available on my website at www.authordennisbrennan.com. It's also available at Barnes and Noble, Amazon, and I think there's 50 other book companies that have it. I don't know all of them, but my website's the easiest place. It's in paperback, hard copy. It's even the ebook you can get if
Mhm.
people prefer that. I was told by some that that's how you're supposed to do it. I prefer to actually have a hard copy, but whatever. Um, those are places you can get it.
And I'm assuming at your website, if somebody has a question or wants, they can reach out to you through the website as well.
Yes, there's contact information there.
That's great. Again, there's a saying I've picked up. It's not what you don't know that hurts you. It's what you know that just ain't so. So to see somebody that says there's more to this story, let's bring it out and let's show what's going on. I think that's not only helpful to the Republic, but I think it's helpful to us as citizens to see another point of view and then see which point of view has the best evidence. Because that's ultimately what's holding the Republic together is the truth and what really happened. And, if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. So, Dennis, thank you for your time. Thank you for going through the technological hoops to get on and join us here. And hopefully, we'll have some more information. We'll get a chance to invite you back here to join us for the Constitution study.
Well, that'd be great. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.